You walk through that door, girl, and don't you dare come back crying to me. Emily Carter heard those words and walked through anyway. She was 20 years old, sleeping in a car, and had exactly $4.17 to her name. The sign above the door read, Hell's Angels Garage. Every person in this town had warned her. Her neighbors, the pastor, even the woman at the food bank. But none of them had offered her a job. If this story moves you, subscribe, leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning Emily Carter walked into the Hell's Angels garage, she had not eaten in 31 hours. She knew the exact number because she had been counting. Counting hours was something she had started doing after her mother died, a small, strange habit that had replaced sleeping through the night. When the grief was too loud to ignore and the silence of the car too empty to bear, she counted. Hours since she last ate. Hours since she last spoke to another human being. Hours since the bank changed the locks on the front door of the house where she had grown up. That morning, the number was 31. She had parked her 2003 Honda Civic on the shoulder of Route 9, just outside the eastern edge of Harlow, Montana, and she had been sitting there for 20 minutes staring at the garage. It was an ugly building, cinder block walls, a rolling metal door that looked like it had been repaired so many times the patches had their own patches. A hand-painted sign above the entrance, the letters slightly uneven, like whoever made it had started with confidence and finished in a hurry. Hell's Angels Garage Service Repair Restoration, and below that, taped to the front window with what appeared to be electrical tape, Help Wanted, applying inside. She had driven past this garage a dozen times in the past 3 weeks. Every time she told herself she would not stop. Every time she remembered what people had said. Those men are dangerous, Emily. Former convicts, most of them. They run drugs through that shop. Everyone knows it. A young woman going in there alone, Lord help her. She had heard variations of the same warning from her neighbor, Mrs. Pullman, from the man behind the counter at the wash station, from the woman at the county unemployment office, who had handed her a pamphlet about transitional housing and wished her good luck with a tone that suggested she expected luck to be in very short supply. But here was the thing about warnings Emily had learned. Warnings were easy to give when you had a warm house to go back to. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her hair was pulled back. Her jacket was clean. She had scrubbed it in a gas station sink 2 days ago and let it dry draped over the passenger seat. She looked tired, but she did not look homeless. That distinction had begun to matter to her in ways it never had before. Looking homeless meant people stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a problem. She grabbed her folder, a manila envelope with a copy of her high school diploma, a reference letter from her mother's old employer at the flower shop, and a one-page resume that she had printed at the library, in which listed among her qualifications, detail-oriented, hard-working, and quick learner, because those were the only true things she could think of to say about herself that also sounded professional. She got out of the car. The wind off the Montana flatlands hit her immediately cold and sharp, carrying the smell of motor oil and dry grass. She walked across the gravel lot, her sneakers crunching with each step, and she pushed open the glass door beside the rolling garage entrance. The smell hit her first. Oil, metal, rubber, and something else coffee, she realized. Strong coffee, freshly brewed, the kind that fills a room the way a fire fills a hearth. The front area was small. A counter, a computer that looked 10 years old, a corkboard covered in work orders and business cards, 3 plastic chairs against one wall. On the counter sat a coffee maker, not a fancy one, just a plain black 12-cup machine, and beside it a stack of styrofoam cups and a handwritten note that said, "Help yourself, we mean it." There was no one at the counter. From behind the garage door that led to the workshop, she could hear the sound of tools, the metallic rhythm of a wrench, the hiss of an air compressor, someone whistling something that might have been a country song played at the wrong tempo. Emily stood at the counter and waited. After a full minute, she cleared her throat. Nothing. She reached forward and hit the small bell on the counter. The whistling stopped. Heavy footsteps crossed the concrete floor on the other side of the door, and then the door swung open and Emily Carter came face to face with the largest human being she had ever seen in her life. He was not young. She put him somewhere in his mid-50s, though she would have believed 60. His hair was silver gray, pulled back at the nape of his neck. His beard was the same color and extended down to the collar of his flannel shirt. His arms thick and ropey with old muscle mapped with tattoos that started at his wrists and disappeared up under his sleeves rested at his sides. He had the kind of face that had been weathered by decades of something, weather or hard living, or both. Deep lines around his eyes. A jaw that looked like it had been set and reset more than once. He looked at her. She looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said in a voice that was lower than she expected, but somehow not unkind, "You lost." "No," Emily said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm here about the sign, the help wanted sign." He tilted his head slightly. "You know what kind of shop this is?" "A garage," she said. "Motorcycle repair and restoration." "You know who we are," she held his gaze. "I know what people say about you." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something more complicated than that. "And you came in anyway." "I came in anyway," she confirmed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped back and gestured toward the plastic chairs. "Sit down, I'll get Hawk." She sat. She placed her manila folder on her knees and folded her hands on top of it and breathed carefully the way she had taught herself to breathe these past months, slow and slow out, because panic was a luxury she could not afford. She listened to the sounds of the garage, the air compressor cycling, the clank of something metal being set down. Two voices, low and indistinct, somewhere deep in the workshop. Then one set of footsteps, different from the first, not as heavy, but deliberate, measured. Like someone who had learned a long time ago that there was rarely a good reason to rush. The door opened again. This man was older than the first, or maybe the same age. It was hard to tell. He was lean where the first man was large, with sharp gray eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that somehow looked completely natural on a man wearing a leather vest covered in patches. His gray hair was cut close. He had a coffee cup in his left hand, and he was looking at her with an expression that was neither friendly nor unfriendly. Simply attentive, the way a person looks when they have decided to actually pay attention. "I'm Hawk," he said. "Emily Carter," she said, and stood up to shake his hand, which he accepted. "Sit back down, Emily Carter," he said, and took the chair across from her, rather than going behind the counter. "Tell me why you're here." She had prepared an answer for this. She had rehearsed it in the car, something professional, something that emphasized her work ethic and her willingness to learn and her adaptability. What came out instead was, "Because I need the job." Hawk looked at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "People need lots of things," he said. "That's not a reason, that's a condition." She swallowed. "I'm homeless," she said. The words still felt strange in her mouth, like a word in a foreign language that she understood intellectually but had not yet made peace with. "I've been living out of my car for 6 weeks. My mother died in February. The house went to the bank. I've applied at 17 places in this town, and I've had 2 callbacks and no offers. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance to work." Hawk said nothing for a moment. From the garage, the whistling had started again. "You ever work in a shop before?" he asked. "No, but I'm not afraid of dirt. I'm not afraid of hard work. And I don't complain." "What's in the folder?" She handed it to him. He opened it and looked through it without haste, reading the reference letter, glancing at the diploma, scanning the resume. His expression did not change. "Your reference," he said, "Mrs. Delaney, flower shop on Birch Street. My mother worked there for 11 years. Mrs. Delaney knew me since I was 9. "The shop's been closed since April," Hawk said. Emily blinked. "I didn't know that." "She moved to Arizona to live with her daughter." He closed the folder and handed it back. "So your reference is unreachable." Emily took the folder. "I know how that looks," she said. "How does it look? Like I fabricated it." "Did you?" "No, I didn't know the shop had closed. I haven't been keeping up with much of anything lately." She said it flatly, without self-pity, which was the only way she knew how to say true things anymore. Hawk nodded slowly. He sipped his coffee. He looked at her the way she imagined a man looked at a piece of machinery he was trying to assess, not coldly but thoroughly. "The job," he said, "is cleaning. The garage, the bathrooms, the break room. You sweep, you mop, you keep the space organized. You don't touch tools unless someone specifically asks you to hand them something. You don't go sit to the back storage area. You don't ask questions about the bikes that come through here or the people who bring them." "Okay," Emily said. "Hours are 7 to 3, 5 days a week. The pay is $12 an hour." "Okay," Emily said again. "You'll be around a lot of men who have spent time in prison or have histories that are not particularly gentle. If that makes you uncomfortable, now is the time to say so." Emily thought about her car. She thought about the 31 hours. She thought about the $4.17. "It doesn't," she said. Hawk studied her for another moment. Then he set his coffee cup down on the floor beside his chair, put his hands on his knees, and stood up. You start Monday, he said. Emily exhaled so slowly, so quietly, that she was almost sure he didn't hear it. Almost. But Hawk, she would later learn, heard most things. She spent that weekend in the Walmart parking lot on the south side of Harlow, which was where she usually parked because the lot was lit all night, and the security guard, an older man named Gerald, had figured out her situation within the first week and had never once said a word about it or told her to move along. She had learned to be grateful for small mercies. She ate a gas station sandwich and a bottle of water, and she sat in the backseat wrapped in 2 sleeping bags she had bought at Goodwill, and she tried to imagine what Monday would look like. She could not quite do it. She had spent so many months trying to imagine futures that did not materialize: the job at the diner that fell through when the owner's nephew needed the position, the apartment application that was rejected because she had no rental history, the cousin in Billings who had said she could stay for a little while and then changed her mind 2 days before Emily was planning to drive there. That hope had started to feel like a language she was slowly forgetting. She told herself not to think too far ahead. Monday first, just Monday. She arrived at 10 minutes to 7. The garage door was already open and she could hear the air compressor running and someone arguing with the coffee maker. She pushed through the glass door and found a young man, mid-20s, maybe, with dark hair and grease already on his forearms at 10 to 7 in the morning, hitting the side of the coffee maker with the flat of his palm. It's not going to respond to violence, Emily said. The young man looked up. He had an easy face. The kind of face that looked like it smiled often and didn't particularly care if the smile was returned. This machine has responded to violence every morning for 6 years, he said. I'm not about to change the relationship now. He hit it again. The coffee maker sputtered and began to brew. He pointed at it triumphantly. See? I see, Emily said. You're the new person, he said. Not a question. Emily. Ace. He extended his hand, greasy, unashamed, and she shook it. Hawk said you were starting today. You want coffee when this finally surrenders and produces some... Please, she said. It was the first time in a long time that someone had offered her something in a tone that expected nothing back. She stood at the counter, and Ace poured 2 cups, and they stood in that small front room at 10 minutes to 7 on a Monday morning, and he told her where the cleaning supplies were kept and where the mop bucket lived, in which bathroom was absolutely the priority. Bear uses the one on the left, and I'll just say the man is large and leave it at that. And he did it all with such casual, matter-of-fact normalcy that Emily felt something crack open in her chest. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone could see, just a small, almost imperceptible loosening of something she had been holding very tightly for a very long time. By noon on her first day, she had swept the garage floor twice, once because it needed it and once because she had gotten into a corner and found a pile of old rags and loose bolts that had clearly been there since the previous administration, and she had mopped the break room and cleaned both bathrooms and restocked the paper towels and organized the shelf of cleaning supplies into something approaching logic. She was on her knees scrubbing the baseboard behind the break room door when a shadow fell across her. She looked up. The large man from the first day, the one who had gone to get Hawk, was standing in the doorway holding a plate. Lunch, he said. She stared at the plate. A sandwich, thick and real, not gas station thin, and a pile of chips and an apple. I didn't bring anything, she said. I know, he said. I made enough. She didn't know what to say to that. I'm Bear, he said. Emily. I know. He set the plate on the break room table. Eat it before Ace finds it. That man has no respect for other people's food. He left before she could thank him. She sat at the break room table and ate the sandwich, and it was turkey and Swiss on sourdough, and it was the best thing she had tasted in weeks, and she was careful not to cry because she was at work and she was professional, and she was not going to be the kind of person who cried over a sandwich. She was not entirely successful, but no one saw. The first week passed, then the second. She learned the rhythms of the garage the way you learn the rhythms of a new house where the floor creaks, which door sticks, what sounds mean normal, and what sounds mean something needs attention. She learned that Ryder, the quiet mechanic with the watchful eyes, worked better in silence, and that if you needed to get his attention, the best method was to set a fresh cup of coffee within his line of sight and wait. She learned that Bear, despite his size and his prison record, which he mentioned casually in passing, the way some people mention having gone to college, volunteered every Wednesday afternoon at the Veterans Support Center on Maple Street, and had been doing so for 9 years. She learned that Ace actually had a name Antonio, but had been called Ace since he was 19, because he could fix any engine in under an hour and had once done so while conducting an argument on the phone. She learned that Hawk did not talk very much, but when he did, the other men listened. She learned that on Thursdays, a group of neighborhood kids, 12 of them, ranging from about 10 to 16, came to the back of the garage after school, and Ace taught them basic motorcycle maintenance, and they were loud and curious and occasionally catastrophic with a wrench, and Ace never once raised his voice at any of them. She learned that the garage was not what the town said it was. It was not what she had expected, and she was still not sure what to do with that information. 3 weeks in, she was restocking the supply shelf when she heard voices from the front room. She recognized Hawk's voice and another voice she didn't know, sharper, smoother, the kind of voice that had clearly been trained to project confidence. "I'm prepared to make a very fair offer," the second voice said, "well above market value." "You already said that," Hawk said, "and I'll say it again if it helps. Mr. Hawk." "Right, Hawk." A brief pause that contained something Emily couldn't name. Condescension, maybe very carefully wrapped. "Look, the industrial district is going to be redeveloped regardless. That's not a threat, it's just the direction this town is heading. But I'd rather have willing sellers than what?" Hawk's voice was quiet, "than the alternative." Which is another pause. Which is that things get complicated. Emily had stopped moving entirely. She stood perfectly still in the back hallway, her hand on a bottle of cleaning solution, and she listened. "I've owned this property for 22 years, Hawk said. "I've paid my taxes. I've followed every code and every regulation and every inspection. My men have jobs here. Those kids out back have somewhere to go after school. I'm going to need you to tell me why I would give any of that up." "Because I'm offering you a very generous number," the smooth voice said. "Money," Hawk said, "is not always the thing a man needs most." Silence. "Think about it," the smooth voice said. "I'll be in touch." Emily heard footsteps in the door, and then she heard nothing but the sound of Hawk standing in the front room. After a moment, she stepped into the doorway. Hawk turned and looked at her. He did not appear startled. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough," she said. He nodded. He picked up his coffee. He drank it. "Who was that?" Emily asked. "Victor Langley," Hawk said. "He's a developer. He's been buying up this end of town for 2 years." He looked at his cup. "He'll be back." "And when he comes back?" Hawk looked at her with those sharp gray eyes. "Same answer," he said. "No." Emily nodded. She went back to her shelf. But she stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing with a feeling she couldn't quite name, gathering in her chest something between dread and something older and more familiar. The feeling of being somewhere that was about to be taken away. She knew that feeling very well. She hated that it had followed her here. The moment that changed everything happened on a Thursday afternoon, 4 weeks into the job. Emily had finished early. The garage was cleaner than it had been in what she suspected was years. She was in the break room refilling the paper towel dispenser when she heard the door from the garage open behind her. She turned around. Bear was standing in the doorway. He was holding a piece of paper. His face, which was generally the face of a man who had made peace with most of the world's difficulties, looked different, tighter, like something was pulling at it from the inside. "Emily," he said, "you got a minute?" "Sure," she said. He came in and set the paper on the table. It was a printout, a news article she realized from the local paper. The headline read, "Young woman seen regularly at Hells Angles, compound concerns raised." She read it. It took her 30 seconds. It named her, Emily Carter, 20, described as spending considerable time at the Hells Angles garage, quoted a concerned citizen unnamed suggesting the club might be exploiting a vulnerable young woman, quoted a county official saying the situation warranted attention, used the phrase troubled background to describe her. Did not quote Emily Carter. Had not in fact contacted Emily Carter. She looked up from the paper. Bear was watching her. "Hawk wanted you to see it before someone else showed it to you," he said. Emily set the paper down on the table very carefully as though it might do something if handled roughly. "Who wrote this?" she said. "Reporter named Dale Hutchins. He covers local crime." "I'm not a crime." Bear's jaw worked. "No," he said, "you're not." She looked back at the paper, at the phrase troubled background, at the word exploiting, at her own name sitting in that sentence like something foreign, something that did not belong to her. "What happens now?" she asked. Nothing, Bear said, unless you want something to happen. She thought about that. She thought about the 17 job applications. She thought about the apartment rejections. She thought about the cousin in Billings. She thought about 31 hours without food. She thought about this turkey sandwich on sourdough that a man named Bear had made her on her first day at work because she had not brought her own lunch. She thought about the coffee Ace had poured without being asked. She thought about Hawk saying no to Victor Langley in a voice that contained no anger and no fear, just certainty. She thought about what it meant that the one place in this town that had hired her and fed her and treated her like a person was now being described as a threat to her well-being by people who had never once tried to find out if she was okay. She folded the paper in half. She slid it across the table. She stood up. "Nothing," she said. "For now." And she went back to work. But the word "for now" sat in the air between them like smoke, and they both knew it. And outside, somewhere in this small town that had already taken so much from her, Victor Langley was picking up his phone. And things were about to get considerably more complicated. The article ran on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, Emily could feel it. Not in anything anyone said directly. In the way Mrs. Pullman, her old neighbor, crossed the street when she saw Emily walking to her car. In the way the cashier at the gas station on Route 9, a woman who had always asked how she was doing, who had always meant it, suddenly became very interested in the register screen. In the way a man she didn't recognize slowed his truck to a crawl as he passed the garage parking lot, took a long look, and drove on. The town had read the article, and the town had made up its mind. Emily had expected that. What she had not expected was what happened when she walked through the garage door that Thursday morning and found all four of them already there, Hawk, Bear, Ryder, and Ace, standing in the break room not working, which was so unusual it stopped her in the doorway. Hawk looked up first. "Close the door," he said. She did. "We're going to talk about the article," Hawk said. "You don't have to," Emily started. "We're going to talk about it," he said again, not unkindly but firmly in the way that made clear the statement was not an opening for negotiation. She sat down. Ryder, who had said fewer than 30 words to her in 4 weeks, put a coffee in front of her without being asked. She looked at him. He had already looked away. "The article is going to bring attention," Hawk said. "Some of that attention will be official, inspectors maybe, county people asking questions. We want you to know that none of that is your fault and none of it changes anything about your position here." Emily wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "It might bring trouble for you," she said. "Trouble," Bear said from the corner, in a tone that suggested he and Trouble had a long and unimpressive relationship, "has found us before." "This is different," Emily said. "This is deliberate. Someone is using me to get to you." She looked at Hawk. "Langley." Nobody confirmed it. Nobody denied it. "The article doesn't name him," Ace said. "It doesn't have to," Emily said. "The timing isn't a coincidence. He came in here 2 weeks ago. You said no. Now there's a newspaper story about a vulnerable young woman being exploited by a motorcycle club." She said the words carefully, the way you handle something that has a sharp edge. "That's not a reporter who stumbled onto a story. That's a story that was handed to a reporter." Hawk was looking at her with that expression she had started to recognize, the one that was not quite surprise, but was adjacent to it. Like a man who had expected something smaller and found something larger instead. "What do you want to do?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. In her experience, that question, "What do you want?" was rarely asked by people who actually planned to let the answer matter. "Nothing yet," she said. "I want to watch what happens next." Hawk nodded. That was all. Just a nod. But it was the kind of nod that meant something. The kind that meant, "All right then. We watch together." She went back to work. And for the rest of that morning, under the noise of the compressor and the rhythm of wrenches and Ace's off-key whistling, Emily Carter did something she had not done in months. She made a plan. The first inspector arrived on Friday. He was a young man from the county building office with a clipboard and new boots that had not yet learned to be comfortable in the specific energy of someone who has been told to find something without being told what. His name was Barrett. He introduced himself to Hawk with a handshake that was slightly too firm and eyes that moved around the garage slightly too quickly. Emily was mopping the hallway. She kept mopping. She listened. Barrett walked the garage for 45 minutes. He checked the fire extinguishers. He measured the clearance between the workbenches and the emergency exit. He noted the chemical storage. He photographed things with his phone, always slightly away from where the men were working, always just at the edge of his official business. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. And the garage was clean. Emily had made certain of that, more certain than she had ever made anything in her life, because she had understood 3 days ago that clean was now a form of armor, and the documentation was current, and the extinguishers were in date, and the electrical panel was labeled, and every code that could be followed was followed to the decimal point. Barrett stood at the front counter and wrote something on his clipboard for a long time. Then he looked up at Hawk. "Everything appears to be in order," he said. "It always has been," Hawk said. Barrett clicked his pen. "We may need to follow up." "You know where we are," Hawk said. Barrett left. The door had barely closed before Ace said loudly from under the bike he was working on, "In order. 22 years in business, and some kid with new boots tells us we're in order." "Ace," Ryder said. "I'm just saying." "Don't," Ryder said. Ace said nothing else. But Emily heard the thing that was underneath the silence, the specific weariness of men who had been looked at this way before, who had spent years being investigated and questioned and documented and assessed. Not because there was evidence of wrongdoing, but because of what they looked like and what they wore and where they came from and what labels had been attached to them so long ago that people had forgotten the labels were ever separate from the men. She rinsed out her mop bucket and said nothing. But something shifted in her chest. Something moved from taste to something with more edges. The second article appeared 12 days after the first. This one was not in the local paper. It was online, a regional news aggregator that Emily had never heard of and that she noted had no physical address listed on its website. The headline was worse than the first one. It called the garage a known gathering point for former offenders. It quoted a local social worker, unnamed, unverifiable, expressing concern about vulnerable individuals being drawn into motorcycle club culture. It included a photograph of Emily, not from the newspaper, a photograph taken outside the garage, candid from across the street. Someone had been watching. Someone had been watching and photographing her, and she had not known. She found out about the second article the same way she'd found out about the first bear, a printout, the break room table. But this time his face was different. There was something in it she had not seen before. Something controlled, but hot underneath the control. "How long has someone been out there with a camera?" she asked. "We don't know," Bear said. "Does Hawk know about this?" "Hawk's the one who told me to tell you." She picked up the printout and looked at the photograph. She was carrying the mop bucket. Her head was down. She